Hi there. If you're planning to grow cut flowers or flowers of any type just for the pure joy of looking out at them, if you're planning to do that for next year, then now, here in the middle of August, is a perfect time for sowing your hardy annual cut flower seeds for next year. And that for several reasons. First one is that you can get the flowers flowering earlier. So they've had time to settle into the ground, they know what they want to do, and they are good to go as soon as the ground starts to warm up next spring. So for spring sown flowers that would typically flower July, August, you could be getting those flowers in June. And June is a bit of a problem month for getting flowers, June, July time. So getting them earlier is a bonus, and sowing them now helps with that. Those flowers will, or the plants themselves, will also be more robust. And I'm talking about hardy annuals, not tender or half hardy or whatever. It's hardy annuals, and that means they can go to temperatures lower than or as low as -5, something like that. Now, depending on how cold your winters get, you may not have the option of doing this. But if, like most places in the UK, the winters are not that extreme, then you should be okay. The second reason is for those plants that take a long time to get established. Starting them now in mid-August allows them to get themselves germinated, create a small seedling, and then just rest until next spring when they can shoot up and then do their growth. So things that take a long time to get started really benefit from an August sowing. And they're really the two reasons why I would plant any hardy annual now in August, ready for next spring. And I start the sowings mid-August because I want the plants to be established. They don't need to be very big plants, but I want them to be big enough so I can plant them out in the ground. If they're in the garden, they can fend for themselves, and in all honesty, they fare better in the ground than they do in the greenhouse, in my experience. That's not to say I wouldn't have a backup in the greenhouse, but I would be expecting the ground planted seedlings to be better off. So I try and get them done in August, so I've got enough time to get them germinated and then planted out before winter hits. So now, mid-August, so it's the 16th of August, is the perfect time to get sowing. So these are the seeds I'm going to be sowing this year to get started. These first set are all of the type that are quite a quick season. So they are either quick to flower and then go over, and then you can succession plant them quite successfully. So it's useful to have several sets of, so starting in August and getting the first batch out early is a bonus. So one of those would be Calendula. Calendula grows brilliantly in my soil. It is a constant colour in my garden, and it just adds some lightness and freshness to anything. So it's a nice yellowy, the pale yellows, lemony yellows going on to the buttery oranges are perfect for me. They don't last very long, and that's the thing with Calendula. Easy to grow, don't last very long. So I can get them started earlier, and then they'll be flowering earlier. So they may even be in flower with the tulips next year, and that would be end of May. So they would be working perfectly if that's the case. So it's good to get them started. So they're on the early starter list. The next plant is Corncockle. Corncockle is quite a tall meadow flower. You don't really see it in meadows these days. You don't really see meadows, to be honest. However, the plant itself is quite tall, billowy, quite a gentle white and purple. And by sowing it now, I should get it earlier. So it should be flowering in June, just in time to go alongside any roses and biennials that I have sown. The next plant is Ammi Majus. Ammi Majus is a stalwart in my garden. Again, it's a tall plant, it's a filler flower. Seeds that were sown in the spring will be flowering July into August. Seeds that are sown this time of year will be flowering in June. So that will go along with the roses, peonies. It adds that extension with all of the laciness and airiness of cow parsley and spring and everything else. So it's just a fabulous flower, fabulous filler flower for an arrangement. So wouldn't be without it. So that's a definite must for me. Next is Nigella. Nigella again is quick to go over. They're filler flowers, very delicate blues, whites, pinks, but I tend to grow them mainly for the seed heads. So if I can get them started earlier and then collect those seed heads earlier, then they've got time to be dried throughout in the early days of the summer, so that they can then be added to arrangements within that season, rather than having to wait till the end of the summer and then there's nothing left. So it's all in dried arrangements. They look kind of nice in a fresh arrangement. So I like to generally use it for that, but they are lovely flowers in their own right. Not as tall as some of the flowers, but tall enough for an arrangement. And again, it would be a filler flower. So I would be using that in my arrangements. The next one on my list is a new one for me, and it is Orlaya. I think it is going to be similar to Ammi Majus, and as I said, Ammi Majus is a stalwart in my garden, and so if I've got something to go alongside that, then I won't be so dependent on the Ammi Majus. It also is supposed to flower earlier, so what will be really handy for me is if I sow it now and it flowers in May, which would definitely be before the Ammi Majus, then I can have a long succession of white lacy type filler flowers to go into arrangements. So that's my hope. I think the flowers are maybe, the petals are slightly more pronounced than the Ammi Majus, I think. But as I say, I've never grown it before, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what that one turns out like. And the final one in the quick season or getting them flowering early category is sweet peas. I've grown sweet peas in the past and I love the smell of them. I love little bunches of them, or in their own little posy really, and sprinkled throughout the house. Sowing them now just gets them established. They're quite, they have quite a long root, and they take quite a, they're part of the pea family, so they don't necessarily take a long time to germinate, but if I can get them earlier and then just keep cropping them, then I can maybe extend the season for as long as I can. Everybody says sow sweet peas in autumn, so that's what I'm going to be doing. So that's in the plan for this year. We now move on to the ones that are slow to get going. They either take a long time to germinate or a long time to grow. So the first one, snapdragons or Antirrhinums, I can get them to germinate, but they then just sit there for months, teeny tiny pinpricks of seedlings, and they just don't seem to want to grow. So if I get them started now and then get them out into the ground, they can hopefully just take the winter to compose themselves, think of life, and then in spring decide it's best to flower and carry on up. And then I don't have to worry about them in the spring. That's my thinking. If it doesn't work, we've always got spring to sow them in again. The seeds in spring that you have to sow early, for me, would be what snapdragons would be on that list. And if I don't have to do that because they're already there in the autumn, that is going to be a bonus. So I can start the sowing later in the spring. So that's why I'm trying those. I've not tried it before, so we shall see. The next one on my difficult to germinate list is Larkspur. I really have problems getting this to germinate. I've stratified it, putting it in the freezer for a while, and they say try that. It likes a cold snap in winter. So really, rather than trying to emulate winter conditions in spring, I'm going to do that now. So I am going to plant them out in now and see how they fare. If they don't germinate by the time I'm coming to plant them out, then I might direct sow them, because that is the preferred choice for Larkspur apparently. I am going to try and sow them now and hopefully get something that I can plant out in a month's time, ready for next year, and hopefully for the first time ever have a big crop of Larkspur. And the final one on my list of difficult to germinate is Daucus. And again, I'm not sure whether it's just difficult to germinate, takes a long time to germinate, or just takes a long time to get going. But I only ever managed to get 1 or 2 flowers of the Daucus. So I'm going to try it now, get them overwintered. Sometimes Daucus is classed as a biennial, so it may be that's the reason why I have difficulty. I'm not giving it that long period of rest before it flowers again. So that's on the list. And the Daucus is again in that category that's similar to Ammi Majus. So it's a tall flowering plant, and it will have lace-like flowers. However, it's not white. So if you don't want all of the whites as a filler flower, this one's perfect. So it kind of starts off white, but then goes into a pinky green flower. I mean, we're talking subtle. It's not really pink or really green, just limey greeny colours. And then when it starts going over, the flower head kind of makes a cup shape, which is kind of interesting to put into arrangements as well. So it has a lot of variety and a lot of purposes that I could use it for. So I really would like to get a good batch of that going so that I can make good use of it within my arrangements. So that is it, my list of 9 hardy annuals that I will be sowing now to get planted out in September, to be overwintered and ready to get going in spring, flowering earlier and stronger. That's the plan anyway. If you would like to join me, then I have a seed bundle. I have a seed bundle pack of just those flowers that I've mentioned. So you can sow along with me and we can all compare our results together. The link for the seed bundle is in the description below, and hopefully we can share results later. Let me know what seeds you're sowing this autumn to get your flower season started earlier in the comments below.